let us now recapitulate whatever we have discussed till now. First lecture we focused on sensation. Second lecture we looked at the concept of Lyman or threshold. We looked at absolute difference and terminal Lyman. Then we talked about Weber's law, and we took certain live examples, I would say, to understand how the concept of threshold and how the concept of intensity of the stimulus, the way it is described in Weber's law, how that makes an important type of contribution in terms of understanding our physical world. Then we ended the second lecture saying that always one has to figure out, one has to extract the figure against the background, and this very idea of categorizing figure versus the background is an important phenomena in perception. We also said that figure and background could be interchangeable, and we always look for contours. If we are able to establish it, well and good. If we are not able to establish it, we have confusion. Little later, I think towards the end, we would also take some of the examples of reversible figures. Reversible figure means if you look at it from one point of view, then you see the another type of an impression emerging out. So, something half of the figure becomes the background and remaining half becomes the figure, and then it keeps changing. Okay. And depending on what you consider as background, the figure changes, but that we would see little later. Right now, we are again looking at the strength of the signal. Let us come to an interesting theory. Basically, this very theory has its root in communication and radar system, but in 1950s, 60s, it dragged the attention of psychologists, because psychologists were interested in understanding human behavior, and they tried to understand the strength of the signal and its role in detection of the stimuli, especially in conditions where the intensity of the signal is very weak. Okay. What was realized that Weber's law, Fechner's law, these laws were not sufficient enough to explain how human beings respond in situations when the signals are weak. Okay. And this led to what is called as theory of signal detection. Now, look at the screen. You see a fighter aircraft, the radar system, okay, and the radar of course has to be sensitive enough to receive the signal back from the flight, and finally, signal has to be detected by a human being. So, when you look at the radar system, everything seems very nice, but the problem with the human operator is that he or she has to figure out the presence of the signal, okay, against some type of a noise. Noise in psychology here is whatever is not your intended target is the noise. Okay. Let us understand this very theory by taking this example. Okay. You make a grid, it is a 2 by 2 grid. So, whether the signal is present or the signal is absent, that is category 1, and category 2 in terms of the human response, the operator says yes or no. So, yes versus no in terms of human response, presence versus absence in the case of signals. What are the possibilities? First, when the signal is present and the person responds, yes, it is present. Okay. This is called hit condition. Okay. Second condition, when the signal is absent and the respondent says that yes, the signal is present, okay, although signal is absent, this is called false alarm. Okay. The third situation, when the signal is not present, okay, and the respondent says that yes, it is not present, this is correct rejection. And the fourth situation, where the signal is present, but the person says, the operator says that no, it is not present. This is a miss condition, you have missed detecting the signal. Okay. Now, why this is so important from of course communication perspective. Okay, the radar system, it makes sense, no, because the radar is supposed to detect the signal, so that it can make distinction between the own aircrafts versus enemy's aircraft. Okay. But signal in itself does not make any sense. The human operator has to detect, the human operator has to say that fine, I have identified the signal, which we are saying that this is a hit condition, or the signal is not present and you say that fine, signal is not present, which is a correct rejection. These two conditions are fine, but think of two other conditions that is marked red here, okay, that the signal is absent and you say it is present, it is a false alarm. What would this mean? If you have a system for combating the enemy aircrafts, that is forcibly entering into your territory, and you are the operator who based on the understanding of the radar signal gives a signal that fine, the enemy aircraft has entered into our territory. Okay. The field guns will start firing at that very aircraft. You committed a mistake. Okay. When the signal was absent, you said that yes, there is a signal, and therefore, you raised a false alarm against which the support system started combat operation. Okay. And the second case is again far more dangerous, where the signal is present, but you say no, it is not present. Okay. The enemy comfortably enters your territory. Okay. There is a big price that the country pays for that. So, you realize that the role of the human respondent is extremely important in terms of detecting the signal. Okay. And that is the reason why signal detection theory is taken into account when we look at the perceptual mechanism. Now, in terms of detection of this signal, what is very, very important is the strength of the signal. Remember, in the second lecture also we were saying that the strength of the signal has to play a role, and because the signal has to be detected, therefore, it is called that fine, this is the discriminability index. Okay. This is the strength of the signal, okay, and the way you estimate it, and accordingly that would shape your response. So, the signal is discriminated depending on the separation and the spread of noise in signal and the noise curve. Okay. So, we would take one experimental example here, okay, and then we would move to graphical plotting of the response in this very situation, what is called as the ROC curve. Now, the percentage of hit and false alarms depends on the sensitivity of the operator to the signal. Signal has strength that we have discussed till now, and we have said that fine, it is the strength of the signal which plays an important role. Stronger the signal, higher are the chances that we will detect it. But besides the strength of the signal, what is also important is that I as an operator, how sensitive I am. Okay. And that would be dependent on the cost benefit analysis. What would be the cost benefit analysis? I am rewarded, okay, or I am punished for the response that I elicit. Okay. Therefore, cost benefit analysis will always play an important role. So, in a given perceptual task, one is always supposed to detect the signal, that is the stimuli, against a non-signal, that is the noise. Okay. And this means that the decision outcomes always comes amidst certain degree of uncertainty. Okay. You are not very certain, the strength of the signal plays an important role, your sensitivity plays an important role. Let us look at one of the experimental demonstrations of this. We are taking a case that fine, now the strength of the signal remains constant. In the first case, what we were saying was that the strength of the signal changes, and therefore, it has an impact on the response. Now, we are saying that strength of the signal is made constant, and it is the cost benefit analysis that you make as an operator. Fine. Now, if the operator is rewarded for hits, but he is not punished for the false alarms, okay, then the beta value that one sets is very, very low. Okay. And this what happens is, it will maximize the number of hits, because the operator is not worried about the false alarm. The reason, he is rewarded for the hit, but he is also not punished for the false alarms. So, even though I commit an error, I do not get any adverse remark for it, and if I succeed, fine, it is very good. So, what I would do? I would relax my criteria. Okay. Earlier, if I was using a very stringent filter to say that whether the signal was present or absent, now I do not do that. Okay. What has happened to me? My relaxation of the criteria, okay, which leads to maximizing of the hits, because I am not worried about the false alarm, is primarily guided by this cost analysis that I am making, that I am not paying a cost, but I am always deriving a benefit out of it. So, cost benefit analysis comes into play here. Think of the other situation, D prime has not changed now. Okay. So, the strength of the signal has not changed, but I am not rewarded much for the hit, but I am punished for the false alarms. Okay. What would I do? Okay. My beta will be very high, so that the false alarms also becomes low. This of course would now result also into low hits. So, if I am told that fine, whether you go for a hit, you correctly identify the signal, okay, is important, but it is not as important as if you commit an error while doing that. Take a situation, say in the court of law, two attorneys are arguing against a possible client who is likely to get death penalty. Okay. The cost involved is very high, okay. And therefore, what happens? You suddenly realize that your beta is now very high, because you do not want to create a false alarm. You do not want to argue saying that he is culprit, because you know that if proven guilty, the court will give him a death penalty. So, you walk with extreme degree of caution. Okay. The previous example of the aircraft and the radar warning system that we were taking, if your signal by default you press a button raising an alarm and in turns it triggers air strike, okay, you would be very cautious, okay, because false alarm, the price that you pay for it is very high. So, you understand the situation now. Case 1, when hits are rewarded and false alarms are not punished. In second case, when hits are not rewarded, but then for creating a false alarm, you receive a punishment. Okay. Now, if you graphically plot the result with false alarms on the x axis and the hits on the y axis, okay, you get a curve, and this curve is called the ROC curve, the receiver operating characteristics curve. Okay. This curve represents the pattern of responding expected for a given D prime at all values of criteria. So, you change your criteria, okay, the D prime remains the same, and then you see that how, depending on the criteria that you have selected and the value of that criteria, okay, the curves will change. Now, when D prime is 0, noise and signal plus noise curve are the same, and false alarms and hits will be the same. Okay. That is represented by the diagonal in the ROC graph. Okay. If the D prime increases, the ROC curve bows away from the diagonal, and you would realize the practical implication of it, of the fact that during the Second World War, ROC curve was used for analyzing the radar signals, no? And of course, now we talk about it fondly in our discussion on signal detection in psychophysics. So, you see the graphical representation here, the correct rejection, false alarms, hit and the miss, that is defined by the theory of signal detection. And now look at this very video which explains the ROC curve. Look at this graph now. You have the proportion of the hits, okay, and then you also have the proportion of the false alarms, and then of course, now you have the chance level of response, wherein depending on the D prime that you have set, okay, you give your hits
and the false alarms. So, the detection of the signal will actually depend on your ability to discriminate between the signal against the noise, the stimuli against the non-stimuli.
Think of the other example, in real life situation where one has to detect signal amidst a noise. The best example in the present day would be the camouflage situation. When you try to make the signal of the stimuli weak enough, so that the figure and the ground cannot be detected as two separate situations.
You must have seen movies in real life, several images where you have an individual who will put different colors on the face, would put some bushes on the hat, will add some bushes on the body also, the uniform that they wear, they also have multiple colors. And then when you make a survey, when you look at the object from a distance, you are not able to detect the background and the stimulus. So, the object is not very clearly perceived against the backdrop that against which it is seen.
So, coming back to our key question that we initiated in our second lecture, do we process everything? What do you say now? What we have discussed till now? Number one, that it is the intensity of the signal that we receive in the environment that would determine whether we would be processing it or not, number one. But number two, what we have also seen is that the characteristics of the criteria evolved by the user, the individual who responds, is also important. So, the intensity of the stimuli, and two, what I decide, the criteria that I set for responding, both these things will have its importance when it comes to responding to the given situation. Now, that we have understood that, fine, the intensity of the signal and the criteria that we set, both of them have a role to play, and the fact that we are now saying that all images, all figures have to be extracted out of the ground. What is important, once again we are coming to this concept, that you have to draw a line of difference, the contours. Now, basically contours are nothing but these are change in the gradient between the elements of a perception. So, ambiguity in the contours lead to reversibility, and I said that little later we will see a few examples of reversible images. But in reality, in most of the cases, we have the edges and we have the contours. If you are able to establish this distinction, then you would be very easily able to see visual image against a background, and similarly you can hear a sound against the noise that you are hearing. Look at this very example, a famous example that you find in all textbooks. What do you see here? It is all mix of black and white patches. It is extremely difficult to decipher what is the object and what is the background. Just concentrate at it. Are you able to see? Now, let me help you out. Try to look at this very area. Can you see the object now? The answer is yes. How you can now detect the object? Because in this case, this was the area that you were shown, and very conveniently now you can look at these black and white patches and you can make out that you are looking at a dog against a familiar type of a background. Exactly similar type of thing works when it comes to human beings. Now, look at this very example. This is a photograph published in a newspaper where an Indian army soldier is shown in a camouflage, and he is basically taking part in an exercise Sudarshan Shakti in somewhere in Barmer district in Rajasthan. Now, if you look very clearly, it is very difficult if the same soldier is put on the ground and you look at the background there, making a distinction between the figure and the background becomes very difficult. Now, if you compare all this, the first case where when we were trying to look at the flying aircraft and somebody sitting in front of the radar screen who is supposed to detect the stimuli, how difficult it would be. You saw the black and white patches where you were supposed to look at the dog against the similar background, how difficult it was. And again here you see it would be extremely difficult if you are not told what you are actually looking at, and that too we are looking at a very close shot. If nothing of this information was given and you were looking at this very object from a distance, it would have been extremely difficult to extract the image, the figure out of the background. Now, coming back to the example of subjective contours, these were the cases where contours are still available. The strength of the signal makes that very difference, and of course, your sensitivity. So, one is your sensitivity, other is the D prime value, these two things would make a difference. But cases where the contours are missing, what do we do? And it has been observed that as human beings we create our subjective contours, and subjective contours play extremely important role. The reason being that what you actually see in the environment does not have that line of distinction, and because you have to read the figure against the background. So, what would be the possible figure and what would be the possible background would depend primarily on the fact how you are subjectively trying to draw that line of distinction, what is called as contours. Look at this very video to understand subjective contours.
Look at this image. What do you see? If I ask you, are you looking at a white triangle laid over 3 circles? The answer could be yes for many of you. Or no, if you just perceive that no, it is actually 3 independent circles, with a piece cut out from each of them, but there is no triangle as such. So, it could be very easily interpreted as if you actually look at 3 independent black circles with a piece cut out of them, and there is no triangle as such. But even though the background is white, I am sure all of you would know when you look at this image, you automatically draw a line to complete the triangle, to perceive that there is a white triangle above this. This is subjective contour. We have already seen this image. Let us look at it again. Look at the 3 black circles and the triangle. You can see a sharp gradient change between the circles, triangle and the background. Now, move the triangle and superimpose it over the 3 triangles. You still see the triangle by filling creative subjective lines. You do not see 3 circles with piece cut out of them. Well, you were aware that the triangle was superimposed on the circles. Now, see these 3 circles, they all have a piece cut out of them. Although this time a triangle has not been superimposed, you still perceive a white triangle put over 3 black circles. This was an example to demonstrate the concept of subjective contours.
Now that we have understood subjective contours, in the next lecture we would be focusing on perception of form. How do we make out the forms that we see in the world, the shape, size and all these things.